Good afternoon, Malachi. How you doing, sir? You well?
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm blessed, my brother, in all ways. We had to talk about your part in Steve McQueen's project, Small Axe, the 5-part anthology series set in London's West Indian community. You played the role of a very special Darcus Howe. Talk about your involvement and what viewers can expect from that, Malachi.
Yeah, so I played Darcus Howe. I played a very small section of his life in the early 70s. And the program basically focuses on a particular court case, which was like labeled the Mangrove 9, where a group of activists and just regular people were arrested unjustly for crimes that they didn't commit. When they were on a peaceful march, they were basically accused of rioting and affray. And so they go through this, I think possibly one of the longest court cases in British history. I think it was about 11 weeks. And Darcus and another character called Althea Jones-LeCointe, who's played by Letitia Wright, both famously represented themselves in court. And yeah, so the bulk of the show is focused on that court case, but also on the events that lead up to it.
You enjoy the role? Because I asked that because it's such a significant and intense piece of work. I do wonder if you guys have any space to enjoy it.
I love that question. Do you know why? Because before we began the project, once I knew I'd got the part and we were in rehearsals and preparing for it, joy was actually one of the words that came to me that would be necessary for this journey. I recognize joy as not just, this fickle emotional feeling, but a strength. It was how we would get through this. And I think it's how we as a people overcome. It's not kind of just being affected and wallowing and sitting down. It's no, we stand up and we celebrate and we dance and we sing still. That's our strength. So joy was very much a part of this project. And all across the board, we were on set and we were playing music, from the 70s. And like we were just enjoying, but obviously we were dealing with very serious subject matters, so there was a time for that. And so it wasn't completely enjoyable, it wasn't always enjoyable. Being in that court, we were in a real court and there's an energy in there, there is an energy in that courtroom. I haven't spent much time in court, right? So I went in there pretty much for the first time. And there was an oppressive energy in there anyway, like just in real life. So that wasn't enjoyable going through those scenes and, this is a real story. This isn't just something made up. These are real stories, but this particular one is an actual real story of things that happen. So, we're recreating and reimagining scenes of things that occurred in the not too distant past. And I'm looking at today's world and I'm thinking, okay, much hasn't changed, and so meeting that reality is not enjoyable in itself, but joy was how we got through it.
It's interesting you say that it's as relevant as it is today as it was then, because that was something Steve touched on when it was revealed that Mangrove would open up at BFI's London Film Festival. So I guess looking at then, looking at what you've done, did you learn anything that you didn't know prior to undertaking the experience?
A whole lot in a very short space of time. I mean, I didn't know who Darcus Howe was. I didn't know who any of them were. The only thing I knew about Darcus Howe was an interview in 2012 in the London riots. That's all I knew about him. And the maddest thing is the interview was basically him defending himself against the interviewer, because the interviewer clearly didn't know who he was either, and was just speaking to him like he was just common random off the street. And he was basically saying, look, like, do you not know who I am? Do you not know what I've done for this country? And you're speaking to me like this, basically. And I didn't know who he was. I didn't know about this court case. I didn't really know about the Black Panther Party movement in the UK. I'd heard about it in America, but not here. There was a whole lot I didn't know. So it was a history lesson in a very short space of time. But then it was also not just them, but understanding that they were part of a much bigger movement that was happening, you know, and there were so many stories that were uncovered. And there's still, I mean, if anything, it's given me much more of a hunger to really dig into what Black British history was in this country, you know, because as you know, I'm sure already, it's not something that's taught to us in schools or in the curriculum or anywhere really. It's something you have to go out and find. And so I'm really glad that this project is getting the platform that it has. So it's not just something that's tucked into the corner, but it's going mainstream so everyone can see it and everyone can understand its relevance.
What was it like to work with Steve? I know he's a taskmaster, perfectionist. His life's work speaks volumes and speaks for itself. So being at the stage of the career that you are, what was it like to be exposed to? Was that the first time you worked with him? And what was it like to being exposed to such an artist? I can't even call him a film director, he's just an artist.
Thank you. I use the same term because yeah, he is an artist. He's across the board. He's not just a director. But the thing that struck me most about him, and I think is the thing that I find most beautiful about him is his humanity. You know, it's very rare that you come across someone who is so excellent at their craft and also so kind, you know, and not in a hierarchical sense or not in a, I'm going to be kind to you because you're the actor I'm working with. Like, it's across the board. Whoever he's speaking with, he gives them his time, whether that's the extras or the driver or the cooks. Like, he gives them that same attention and he cares. You know, he comes onto set and he's doing projects that I believe he genuinely cares about. And there's a different energy there when you're doing that, as opposed to, you know, this just get the paycheck. You take time, you know. And so it was beautiful to work with him. It was beautiful to work with someone so passionate and so well able at, in terms of what they do. He's the kind of person you sit down with for 5 minutes and you learn something, whether you're working or not.
Agreed.
You know.
Totally.
So it was definitely a blessing. He's
free as well. He's like a free person. He's like a free Black man.
Yeah, you know, the truth, like his integrity, like there's no filter, you know, he just is. He sits down and he is Steve. You know what you're getting with him. And again, it's refreshing in the acting industry where there is, you know, you come across a lot of performers all the time, you know, naturally. He's not that. And I love him for it, you know. It can be uncomfortable sometimes, but the truth is, and it's necessary.
So did he help you to bring out a better version of Malachi Kirby for this role, bearing in mind your lack of understanding of who Darcus was before, or just all things combined? Him, the energy, the research, just being in that melting pot. What did it enable you to deliver in terms of performance?
Well, I'll tell you what, the first audition that I had with him, I did an audition tape first, and then there was the first time I met with him in the room. And in that first audition, we sat down, and we didn't go straight into the part. He was like, you know, why are you here? Why did you become an actor? What are you doing? And it was just like, huh. Do you know what I mean? Because my reasoning for wanting to act has changed over the years, but he made me straight away inspect, you know, what, like, he made me recognize straight away, like, okay, like, why are you here? Like, there has to be a purpose to what you're doing. And it was confronting, you know, but it was necessary. And I know that already in itself, like, that changed me. It made
that woke you up straight away.
Perspective of my career and the kind of work that I want to do and why I want to do that work. Because you can kind of get into a pattern of, you know, just taking job after job, and, you know, it's like you're getting through it, and it's like it can be manic sometimes, and sometimes you lose perspective, and you just honed in on it straight away, and it was like, cool, if you're here, be present, you know. And that was one of the other things that struck me about him, is how present he is in the midst of all of the chaos that's going on. You sit down with him and he's there with you. And that's one of the things that I think I will take away most from the experience of working with him, was just the importance of being present for every moment, and not being ahead and not being behind, just being right here in this moment. Yeah. He
obviously is able to pull together some great talent. So you were working alongside other people who I'd imagine had been energized and motivated in a similar way. So what was that like? Just pitting your talent alongside some of the other guys that were involved in the project?
Again, it was a blessing, man. It felt like working with family, you know, and yeah, I mean, I don't know how to say it without sounding cheesy, but they're just beautiful people.
Sound cheesy for me.
No, man, it's just it was like a dream, honestly. Like, because you're working with people that are incredible artists, even the extras, and I think that's testament to Steve as well, and that he's an artist, as you said, so he's not just looking at the actors, and he's not just looking at he's looking at everything. So if you've got an extra involved, you're not just an extra. It's like, if you're here, then be here, you know. And so everyone just came on and just gave it 100. And so you're working with these incredible artists, and the actors were amazing, but also just really lovely people, just to be real. There was no egos on set, you know, there was no kind of whatever. It was, everyone was just on the ground, you know. And we all recognized why we were there from the get-go. And it was just a joint cause of, like, you know, we weren't on the march, you know, but this was like our version of it. You know, if it felt like that, it felt like whether we were doing march scenes or not, it felt like this whole story for us as artists was our march. Do you know what I mean? This was our protest. We had an understanding, I think, of what this would do, how it would affect the people who watched it. And so this was our march. And we came to it in that way. And there was a sense of unity from the beginning. So yeah, it was just a joy to be in that kind of environment.
Yeah, I think that speaks to somebody at the helm being able to pull together a group that's totally in tune with that, the cultural sensitivities needed to execute a project like this. With the year that it's been, Malachi, a recurring theme for me, where the discussion centering on systemic racism in Britain is concerned, particularly with people that emanate from a wider demographic. One of the things that seems to come up all the time is that context is needed, right? There's a lot of people whose experience isn't the Black experience, who might have seen racism going on over there, seen this court case 50 years ago, but didn't get involved in it. It didn't permeate within their life, their peers, their social group. So they have no context. How far does Small Axe help to impart some context for people who may not have any?
Well, interesting enough, off that question, one of the questions that Steve asked me in our early auditions was Grenfell. He just went straight into Grenfell. And he was like, where was you when that happened? You know, how did that make you feel? Do you remember how you was affected by it? And at the time, I didn't understand why he was asking me that question, because I was in the audition, you know, auditioning for Darcus. I was like, okay, what has that got to do with this story? This is Mangrove. But it has everything to do with it, you know. It was set in the same areas, Notting Hill, and the events that led to Grenfell happening has everything to do with the court case in Mangrove, and it has everything to do with what Darcus Howe was fighting for in terms of not just Black human rights, but understanding that the environment that you grow up in, the educational system, the housing situation, all of that affects the Black British experience, right? And so in terms of its relevance to right now, one of the lines in it is that, you know, they said that we are seen as, Black people are seen as, what did they say? There's one word, something, ponces and prostitutes. I can't remember the line. But basically there is this perspective of Black people that is just skewed by this weird kind of narrative that is like constant in the media. And it affects the way that we live our daily lives, because we're put into this bracket that isn't accurate and doesn't acknowledge the individual experience and the individual person. And so where you have these people that are on this march, and not that they chose to be on a march, Darcus was an activist, but the majority of these people were just regular people. They were your neighbors, they were the shop owner, they were just minding a business. But it was needed because their desire to just exist was being threatened. You know, the whole thing about the Mangrove was it was a restaurant. It wasn't a political base. It was a restaurant. But that in itself was a political act, apparently, to have a restaurant, a Caribbean restaurant in London. And so it gets thrashed all the time, and it gets what do you call it? The police come and raid it. And so they march, and they march because they just want to exist. And in that march, even a peaceful march, they're seen as rioters, they're seen as violent, they're seen as these criminals, and they're taken into a court that deals with murderers and actual criminals. And they're brought into that court for 10 weeks simply for existing. And that is what we're still marching for today. You know, we did this last year. We didn't know that these Black Lives Matter marches were going to happen this year. And we didn't know that the world was going to come to this conversation that we're having now. But it's the same conversation. You know, we're not asking for anything. We're not asking for any favor. We're just saying, can we exist too? Is that okay? Do you know what I mean? Can we be acknowledged? Can we be respected? It's the same thing that they were asking for then, we're still asking for now. I just hope that we can, you know, make some progress, and I hope that this show can shed a bit more light onto that subject and its relevance, not just for Black people, but for people, because we're all here, you know what I mean?
Small Acts, debuts or shows on the BBC November 15th. You can see Malachi Kirby involved in that alongside a plethora of other British talent. My last question, Malachi, how have you dealt with lockdown? How have you dealt with 2020? Lockdowns, pandemics, uncertainty, lack of work, opportunity, can't fly, family. How have you dealt with it? How's it treated you?
Do you know, I'm a man of faith, right? I believe in Christ, and so my perspective hasn't changed. But I think one thing that has kind of just really hit me, that we all knew already, but it just kind of really hit me, the reality of it is that we don't know tomorrow. You know, I had a whole bunch of plans for this year, as I'm sure we all did. None of the plans that I had for this year have come to pass, actually. But we don't know tomorrow. And I think it's important. One thing that's been important for me was to recognize that and be present now. You make plans for the future, fine, but understand I still don't know tomorrow. I didn't know COVID was going to happen. I don't know when it's going to leave. I didn't know these marches were going to happen. I don't know when that's going to end. I don't know what's happening. But also, I'm very hopeful, actually. And one thing I love about being able to look back and in hindsight is that humanity tends to thrive in situations like this, you know, as hard and as challenging as they can be. I think that this time will bring out something beautiful in us. And I think that's already begun. And so I'm excited, and I'm excited for artists in terms of how we will innovate. You know, this isn't, oh, we can't exist anymore, we can't work anymore, we can't do anymore. It's just we need to find a way. That's all. And I believe we will, and we're doing it. We're having this conversation now, you know, we haven't stopped. We'll keep going. So yeah, I'm excited for what these challenges will birth in us.
Been a pleasure talking to you, so I really appreciate your time. Want to wish you all the best going forward, continued success. And unless there's anything else.
No, you too, man. It's been a pleasure.